Hello, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to this session that focuses on the most important thing that we do in our work, which is the equitable support of our students. And as Mary mentioned, I'm Angela Gunder. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the OLC, and this will be our third time featuring a student panel on the closing day of our virtual conference. And I have to say, for me and for so many who have participated before, this is always one of the greatest highlights of the conference. And today will be no exception, although we're going to make it great with your help and support by offering us your questions in the chat for our students who have graciously and generously agreed to be here and are giving their time amidst a lot of responsibilities, amidst classes. I know that Eddie had to change some plans around to be here and may even have to leave early in order to get to class, which I told him that we always support. I'm so excited to have us all engage with them and learn from them about how we can better support our students collectively. So our moderator for today is Sam A.G. Rourke. She is actually one of the student panelists from last year, and she's going to be leading a dialogue with our 3 student fellows here who are joining us from Every Learner Everywhere, which is a solutions network of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that focuses on improving student outcomes, particularly for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students, poverty-affected students, and first-generation students through the affordances of digital learning. And OLC is one of 12 proud network partners of Every Learner Everywhere. And we continue to be humbled by the work that the students here and the students like Sam are doing to advance the centering of quality, of equity, and care in our teaching and learning environments. So one thing I will mention, as is typical about online gatherings, is that the weather can throw everything off. Sam is in a region that is receiving quite a bit of weather and is having some technical difficulties. So what I'm going to do is I will pretend to be Sam. I will do my best and I will kick us off. And then once we see her in the room, we will welcome her to the stage. I also would be remiss in not recognizing our colleagues who are here from Every Learner Everywhere. So if you have questions about the work that we do and the work that these students are doing, both Patty O'Sullivan and Emily Cook are here, and you can ask questions in the chat about Every Learner Everywhere, and they'd be happy to provide links and resources and to help out there. So yeah, you got some waves and some highs. They're wonderful folks and are doing amazing work and are the ones that are helping to guide these students in doing the work that they're doing. So without any further ado, I would like to shift over to each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with Chidinma. Just want to welcome you to the stage, and I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and how you've been able to support educators like us in better understanding the needs of today's students through your work.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. My name is Chidinma Egemanu. I'm a senior at Vanderbilt University studying cognitive studies and human and organizational development. I've been interested in education since high school. I was an ambassador for my city's public education fund, and I also worked as the president of our local Toastmasters for teenagers. And I was really passionate about education because as a Nigerian immigrant, my parents always stressed that, but they often didn't have the resources to help. So I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. So just making things easier for other students like myself was something I was really passionate about. And it's a passion that I've brought into college as well. I've worked at a childhood education lab, and I worked at an ed tech company for higher education strategy. And right here at ELL, we're working on so many different things. One thing I really like that we're working on right now is understanding how HBCUs support their students so that other universities can take some notes as well. So yeah, that's really how I've been able to contribute to education. I'm really excited to answer all of your questions.
Thank you so much. And next, I'd like to welcome Eddie. Same question. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and how you've been able to support educators in better understanding the needs of today's students through your advocacy work.
Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here on today's panel. My name is Eddie. I'm currently a junior at Georgia State University, and I'm majoring in marketing. So how I've helped educators. Currently doing my work through ELE. I'm doing a similar project with Chinema, but on my focus for my personal project is with Hispanic serving institutions, seeing as right now there's a lot of different emerging Hispanic serving institutions. So like, how do you be a lot more equitable when it comes to policy and also incorporating what type of different student support services that those universities are going to need? Growing up, similar to Chinema, I started getting involved in terms of advocacy work and helping underrepresented communities in high school through a lot of different nonprofits and making sure that as I was going through like, okay, I'm going to go to college, like how do I help give back? So now kind of having that same mind frame of like, okay, like how do we include more inclusive language like Spanish? Like how do we make sure that going forward, it's an inclusive framework that's going to be inclusive for Latinos going forward. Yeah.
It wouldn't be a Zoom call if I didn't start talking and was still on mute. So thank you, Eddie. I'm going to have Emma introduce herself, and I'm so happy to welcome Sam into the room. So seems like restarting your modem worked and you were able to get around the storms. And then Sam, I'll have you introduce yourself and then we can jump into the questions and your moderation. So Emma, over to you with the same question. A little bit about yourself and how you've been able to support educators in better understanding the needs of today's students through your advocacy work.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Emma. I'm a junior at Georgia State University, majoring in middle level education. I've always been interested in creating accessible resources for students through intersections of technology and policy, something that I've done since I was a childhood, growing up in an area that didn't have a ton of resources for students. And it's just something that has kind of followed me into my college and my career. So in the past, I've worked with organizations such as Future Leaders in Action and the Latino Leadership Initiative to provide services for low-income, at-risk, and marginalized students. This summer, I will be attending service learning trips to Dominican Republic and Munich, Germany, to further my knowledge of understanding various educational systems around the world and what we can apply right here in the United States, especially understanding what students need to thrive and learn in different settings. And I'm so happy to be here with you this morning to answer all your questions.
All right, and then last but not least, Sam, if you would go ahead and answer that question that I had for the other students of give us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your advocacy work for making education more equitable.
Absolutely. So my name is Samantha A.G. Roark. I'm a pre-law student at Motlow State. I'm about to graduate in May. My experience with Motlow State through digital learning and access has been amazing, and it's been quite life-changing for me. When I started at Motlow State 2 years ago, I was very much focused on my school path, but I was also a musician, and I had some mentors that stepped in. And through digital learning, they were able to work with me in my own business, which I have through music, and help me get my education while working with digital materials to grow my business. I recently was taken to the Grand Ole Opry back in October, and I was inducted as Independent Female Single of the Year. My mentors worked with me to make that possible. Digital access and learning helped make that possible for me. But the biggest thing that made that possible for me was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's something that I feel is the biggest impact that can be made on students, employees, and in society as well.
Thank you, Sam. And Sam, through the technical difficulties, I don't know if you have everything pulled up to be able to moderate, or would it be helpful for me to ask the first question of the group?
I am getting caught up. I'm so sorry. We're having tremendous storms in Kentucky right now. So if you could start the first question, I'll hop in right
Yeah.
at you.
Happy to do so. So diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging are key to all learning experiences and university activities. So my first question for the group is, what does this mean to you, and how can institutions get better at embedding DEI into their work ubiquitously? And let's start with Chidinma for that question.
Of course, thank you. So I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion and kind of embedding that more within like the college environment, I think it should not be like superficial or like very surface level. And I think that like students should definitely like not be like infantilized when it comes to like the level of advice or support that they can provide. I think like making sure that like all the stakeholders within like the college environment like are taken seriously. I think that's something that's very important. And I think that when it comes to like diversity and inclusion, like things constantly change, our communities constantly change. So I think it's something where it's like we need to have like constant meetings and also understand that like having one specific program is not like an end all be all answer to something. And it's something that also has to continue. And I also think that when it comes to diversity and inclusion, like there's so many other different types of diversity that I think that a lot of schools like focus on. I think like neurodiversity is definitely one of those big things, especially if we're talking about like technology and education and like understanding how different students learn. So yeah, I think kind of making sure that there isn't just like one solution, because if you have one solution for a super like diverse environment, then there are other groups that are suffering as well.
That's fantastic. And I think that a lot of folks that are entering into DEI work for the first time, particularly in digital learning environments, are looking for a singular path. And the challenge is that you'll treat students as if they're all the same. And that's the exact opposite of what we need to do and what we know is best for everyone's success. So thank you for that. Let's go to Emma next. Same question.
Yes, to me, DEI initiatives are more than clear-cut subsections in the student handbook. Like Chidinma said, it's learning how to be adaptable and changing. And more often than reading it on a piece of paper, it's how we interact with each other and our students inside and outside the classroom. And I believe institutions can get better at embedding these both in coursework and what happens in our communities as well. So if we're pushing faculty and staff to pull in organizations like ELE and OLC to give trainings and demonstrations, so show how we can support our students, even when they're not in the same room as us, knowing how we can advocate for them and policies in our community and different injustices and impressions we see. So just being activists in our own community, demonstrating what we see written down on DEI coursework and things like that, just keeping our students at the forefront of what we do and ensuring that we hold their own identities and their own lives at the core. So making sure that everything we do is for their best interest, and overall that would just provide strong culturally responsive learning and teaching, both for students and professors.
That's fantastic, Emma. And we certainly need to do more in terms of professional development and making sure that all of our educators are prepared. There is a place for students to help in preparing that professional development such that it's aligned to all of your needs. Eddie, same question.
Thanks for putting it in the chat. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also agree. I don't think DEI should now be just looked at as kind of like a buzzword, just kind of having campus. I think to be truly inclusive at the forefront, I think I'm gonna tackle the question a little bit differently in terms of I've seen a lot of studies, and just from my own personal experience being an out-of-state student, where if I'm not involved on campus, I feel like my academic success also reflects that. And I feel like from a lot of my peers and people I've met through clubs, like once they start getting more involved on campus, they started, oh, like now I can see myself fitting here. Now I can start making friends. I can start building a network. I can see a community of people that are going to support me. But if you don't have that space on campus, if you don't feel like you have anyone to go to or like any faculty peers, then like they're going to be a lot more hesitant. And like, okay, like can I really succeed here? So my challenge to universities would be okay, like how do you make an overarching institutional structure? So like not just having a multicultural center, but making sure that multicultural center is connected to every office beneath that. So like for Georgia State, for example, we have like the LASSO office for the Latino community, the Black Student Achievement office, and like all these offices underneath that, and having a monthly newsletter making sure all social media is upgraded. Being a business student, I'm trying to think about as many ways to get to the consumer as possible. So in this case, colleges are businesses. So how do you get to as many students? So if you have all these channels and you're updating, okay, like here's these spaces, here's these opportunities that we have going on, then it's like, okay, like now if you can find other people that look like you, making sure that you can connect with faculty that are like, hey, once upon a time I was in your shoes. Now, like, how do I kind of help give back and make sure I can elevate you? That's how I would make DEI more ubiquitously better on campus.
Yeah, the challenge too is so many learners are balancing way more challenges than prior. And folks are learning in different modalities. They might do some classes online, some classes face to face, and even feeling like they have the ability to connect is such a challenge. And we have to be able to meet students where they are and make sure that just because you're a fully online student, that you wouldn't, that you have opportunities to connect with your other students. So I also want to give a shout out to Jennifer Panton, who put in a resource in the chat and talked about how a lot of people are handling equity at a surface level. She talks about doing equity, spray and pray equity. Within ELE, we talk a lot about equity gloss, where we just use the word, but we're not actually aligning actions to that, and that we have to go a lot deeper in order to support diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness for our students. So, Sam, you ready to go with the next question?
Absolutely, Dr. Gunder. And I think just to touch on what you said, equity is very important. And I would like to call to action for everybody to step in and invest in that equity, invest in the equity of their students, invest in the equity of your fellow employees. That's the biggest thing that you could do. So to begin with the next question, let's think back to when you first started college. What do you wish that digital learning had been like then, and why? So to begin, let's start with Chudima.
Great, thank you. So when I first started college in fall of 2019, I would say that a lot of my professors used technology the same way it had sort of been used in high school. So like online portals for assignments, and then presentations for class sessions, and maybe like uploading things to a website for working in groups and stuff, but kind of like the more standard ways that technology is used in classroom. Once the pandemic hit and we had to go into virtual classes, I will say that, a lot of it was an adjustment period, especially for like a lot of my instructors. So I think that's kind of when we had to think outside of the box and think about different ways to teach students, whether it's like online science labs and whatnot. So I think because of that, it's definitely led to more diversity in the way I've been taught in the classroom, even though like we've gone back to in-person classes. And I think that, in the beginning, I had to come up with my own ways of like learning. I'm a very like visual learner. I'm like a very like creative learner. Like I use like song lyrics to help me like memorize things sometimes and stuff like that. But it's like, that's not something you can like actively like do in the classroom. So having something that could kind of help with that afterwards was something else very important. And I also think that now one thing that I really appreciate is that we can personalize our own learning, and it can basically allow teachers to ensure that there are different types of learners having access to the tools that they need without the teachers always having to like create those tools themselves. And I think it kind of takes some like space off the instructor as well, while kind of like giving more flexibility. And I think that just having more, having more agency and choice when it comes to the kind of things that I would like to learn, like digitally, has also been helpful as well. So I would say like overall, as we've kind of like looked into other options, I've been able to personalize my learning a bit more. And that's something I wasn't able to do as much when I first started college.
Wonderful. I think with COVID, we learned a lot about human resiliency, didn't we? But with digital learning, you're exactly right. Change is key, and having access is key, but adapting and growing with digital learning to the needs of students is absolutely the most important. Emma, let's go to you. So think back to when you first started college. What do you wish that digital learning had been like then, and why?
So when I started college in fall of 2020, it was my first time ever experiencing an entire selection of courses and semester online. I graduated early, so I wasn't really a part of the initial lockdown switch to digital learning back in March of 2020. And in addition to that, I didn't really come from a school that had a lot of technology embedded in their courseware or anything like that. I had my first laptop given to me by my university when I started. I had never had my own piece of personal technology. So I think a lot of professors and faculty as well didn't even understand how to make that switch and replicate in-person learning to mirror or even exceed what was classroom learning. And it's not a question of the professor's knowledge itself, but it's knowing how to deliver that same information in a digital format is an entirely different subject altogether. And I think that ensuring that humanity and human interaction is at the core of digital learning. And it's so important. And I wish faculty had more training and understanding on how to, like I said, mimic or replicate and even exceed classroom learning. But of course, with the pandemic, it was so hard to make that switch and give everyone the time they needed to adjust. Reflecting back, so many of my lectures were pre-recorded, and I rarely ever saw my professors face or even interacted with them. It felt a lot of times like I was just talking to like a digital bot online. It didn't feel like it was an actual human interaction. So I wish that we could, moving forward in aftermath of the pandemic and also just the tech-centered world we live in, sharing with our professors who have such a wealth of knowledge to share, how they can deliver that content in different interactive digital activities. So not just speaking at students in a recorded lecture or having a Zoom, doing different activities online that you would do in the classroom, or sharing different resources online to mimic those small group discussions, different things like that. And it doesn't have to be challenging. So that's why I think that we can have different trainings and offer different supports, and also make sure everyone knows that not everyone has the same access to technology or the same understanding of technology. So just making sure that we're all on the same page, so that we can all work together, because it truly happens as a collective.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma. So I think that what you said was very powerful about variation, especially variation in the digital space for engagement. I think we learned a lot about Zoom as well, and the different tools and how we could incorporate virtual reality. For example, VR is something that was utilized a lot at my college post-COVID, and something that's still utilized now. So Eddie, think back to when you first started college. What do you wish digital learning had been like, and why?
Yeah, so I also started COVID during fall 2020 when COVID first hit, like fully transitioned for college students, and it was really hard for me too, especially not having like feedback, and also being in like intro level classes where the average class size is at least 150 to 300 people. So like when you have that many humans just in one call and or like just pre-recorded lectures, I felt like Emma said, like, it was a very big disconnect for me as well. And then one thing that Yeli that we have been researching a lot is specific educational tools. And for me, I think Realize It, Connect are two of the big ones I know a lot of students are familiar with. But having courseware that has like feedback loops built into it, so like you can have real time feedback. I'm like, okay, like you're going in the right direction, or like, hey, maybe you need to go back and read this part of the chapter. Like, hey, like maybe you should try this activity. For me, like I need different ways to learn, and having a courseware that I can learn from my mistakes and keep building on and saying like, okay, this is how the subject's built on, instead of just me reading like 20 pages of a chapter digitally. And then like when I try to reach out to the professor, like it's like, oh, like, like you could do this and this. But like if I don't have someone kind of guiding me throughout the way, because then like you can't always reach out to a professor when you have like one small question, but like I feel like with courseware, if it kind of always is giving me tips, that's where I feel like I could have been best supported during when the pandemic first started.
Thank you so much, Eddie. And again, it wouldn't be Zoom if I didn't try to talk on mute, right? So we're going to go and move along to our next question. One of our previous students, our ELE students, Kiara Williams, gave a lightning talk at our conference last fall, where she talked about the importance of including students in the design of education. What are some of the ways you think these educators should be including students in the process of building the future of learning? We'll begin with Chudman.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great question. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to include students and to like not assume that they don't have something to provide. I think one way that would be really interesting would be like when it comes to like syllabus design or curriculum design. I think like kind of having some student input on certain types of like topics that could be covered, or certain ways to kind of like teach students, or more engaging ways to teach students, I think would be really interesting. Because I feel like sometimes, like, you know, maybe there are issues that our professors might not know about, because maybe there are issues that are specifically impacting Gen Z that could be made as a connection to what we're learning in class. Or maybe there's like a different way, or like a different like method of like sharing information. Like I know for one of the classes that I had one of my professors like sharing like a TikTok video that was like related to one of like the education and sociology lessons we were learning. And I feel like a lot of the time, like people think that maybe like social media cannot be included in education in some way, but it's like pretty similar to like sharing a YouTube video or like a TED talk or something. My professor is like a bit younger, so I think that's kind of why, like, you know, that TikTok was something that she kind of thought about, but it was like an engaging way to kind of just like take this thing that we're learning in class and then package it in a way that students were familiar with. And it was I think like if professors kind of like talk to students a bit more about the kind of way that they would like to see their own materials presented, or the specific things that might be impacting young people that they're not familiar with, I think that's definitely one way that students could be involved in the learning process.
Thank you so much. I think that was wonderful. And social media being integrated into school is a revolutionary idea. I feel in modern times with digital learning, we have to be open to new ideas, exactly as you just said. So let's move along to Emma.
As someone going into the field of education, currently in a teacher prep program for middle grades, grades 6 to 8, people always ask if I feel blind to a lot of the issues going on regarding policy and legislation directly affecting educators, whether that's K through 12 or higher ed. And I always say that I don't, because I'm in such a great program right now at Georgia State that really focuses on social justice and just making sure our educators are aware of these issues. And my professor always takes time out of class to discuss different bills that are introduced, harmful bills, and what we can do. And we just talk about them, and we create these safe spaces for open dialogue and how we can continue to deliver our social justice center teaching and supporting students throughout these policies, making different strategies. And everyone here who's in education knows that it's a community. And if you try and take on everything by yourself, you're going to get burnt out really fast. And you need to know to ask for help and, you know, have others who have the same goals and mission as you to lean on. So for me, that's really helpful in going through my prep program, especially as I gear up to start student teaching. And like we've said, that's kind of been the common theme. Education is constantly changing and we have to adapt with it. And just knowing that we have different supports and people in our corner, and continuing to learn, even as educators, is just so beneficial to us and future students. So making sure we're aware of the policies and different things that go on, and keeping ourselves informed, especially when we deal with students who these bills directly impact, is just so important to our work.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Emma. So, Eddie, what do you have on this one for us?
Yeah, so I think in terms of how to have students in the process going forward, I guess an example, it's like semi-related, but it kind of is. So at Georgia State, they've recently built a student fee activity committee. So like they've been trying to get students at the forefront of like, okay, like if your tuition's already gonna go to fees, how can we get your guys' say in terms of all the student organizations on campus? How are we gonna like, because a lot of the faculty came and were like, hey, like we know we're trying to build like internal GSU tools. Like how can we make sure that your voices are being heard? Because right now we realize there's like a lot of forms. Like it's very hard to get access to funding, getting access to spaces on campus to host events. And like we shouldn't have this disconnect. So like let's make an exact like committee of different student leaders from all different types of student organizations, like political, business, or just fun organizations. So, like, okay, so if we have this focus group that can be representative of the whole student body, then we always have feedback and like, okay, we have representation of how we should change our policy going forward. And I would imagine just for students, like they can also have that same philosophy when applying this to the classroom and not just student organizations. So they can have focus groups for different schools. So like at the School of Business, School of Education. And if you have different majors within that school and then also different years, if you have a big sample size, okay, like what does and doesn't work for you guys, kind of get the average of those results and then start applying it to your educational practices. I feel like that would be the best way to include students.
Awesome, Eddie. Thank you. I think student voices are something that we can't go without looking towards. And that was wonderful, Eddie. Thank you. Dr. Gunder, I see you're taking audience questions right now. Are we moving along to those?
Yeah, let's do that. There's a bunch that are fantastic, but while I queue up these questions for you, why don't you take that one that came in the chat first, which was from Sarah, who asked, how did your institution manage the expense of VR equipment?
Wonderful, thank you. So with our institution, we actually went to our President's Council, and we went and we have a form within our university. And when we need to do spending, we send out a form. It goes out to everybody on the President's Council, but there are student members on that. For example, I am president of SGA at my college. So when we have anything that involves student activity fees or use of funds, we go in and we meet on it and we all decide on it. Post-COVID at our university, we felt that VR was one of the biggest things that we could do to engage our students, give our students something to reduce stress. So we have an open VR lab. We can walk into it anytime. If I'm stressed out during midterms or studying for a block, I can go in, I can play some games, I can relieve my mind. But then again, in the next block of time going on, our nursing students may be in there doing virtual hands-on science. So it was something that they felt that they needed to spend the money on, and it has been very useful. And then T-Mobile actually partnered with my college. In closing on this question, T-Mobile partnered with my college, and they provided all students with a free hotspot and a free cell phone. And then our school was able to start letting us lease out VR equipment from the library. So they started with a very small VR program, and they've grown it to something massive, and even partnered with T-Mobile. And we all have had this is going on 2 years now, of free hotspot provided by T-Mobile. I'm just catching up with the chat here. Sorry, guys. All right, so I think that is everything in touch with that question. I don't have any other comments coming in. So Dr. Gunder, do we want to move on to Nicole Weber's question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so this question is from Nicole Weber. I love hearing all y'all's wonderful perspectives. What's one thing that you would recommend instructors do when teaching fully online courses to build community and support inclusion at the beginning of the semester? And no, that one didn't have any direct person that they wanted to hear from. So Eddie, Emma, if either of you guys want to chime in and give your perspective on that, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I can't see the specific question here. Again, actually, do you mind repeating it?
Absolutely. What's one thing that you would recommend instructors do when teaching fully online courses to build their community support and inclusion at the beginning of the semester?
Yeah, I think emphasizing flexibility is something that's like important. And I think it's also something that's like important for in-person classes as well, especially because, you know, if you're working with like mainly like digital platform, there are going to be times when certain students might not have internet access. There are certain things that students will not have access to due to their socioeconomic status, or maybe they're like, I know like for a lot of like students, like when we went back home, maybe we were like helping out our siblings or something like that. So even though we were home, it wasn't as if we didn't have other responsibilities and stuff like that. So kind of like taking that into account, trying to make it as interactive as possible, maybe like hosting like some group social study sessions or something that really kind of engages students and lets them know that even if they're like struggling in a specific part, they can still receive support in this other way, with different learning tools and different learning styles. So just using the technology and make it as diverse as possible kind of like shows that like there's some sort of like flexibility when it comes to different types of learning as well. And yeah, I think I would say those are kind of the main things. Because I think like if you're not in front of the person physically, sometimes you'll have to kind of like follow up more or dig a bit deeper when it comes to ensuring that like, the class is not just, a session where they're just coming in and looking at a Zoom screen and then leaving. They're actually kind of feeling like, okay, I'm going to touch base with this professor on a certain thing because that's something that they told me to do. I think once there's that sort of like accountability thing that the students like moved into, they kind of like also are made to engage in it as well. So I think that is one way that could happen.
Thank you so much. I think engagement is one of the biggest things, to touch on what you said, as far as involving to build community. For example, my university utilizes discussion boards, open discussion forums in all of our classes where we're not on campus or on ground. And that really allows us to communicate, but our professors also communicate in those discussion boards with us, and they listen to our opinions and our ideals based on all of the different modules that we work on. So thank you for that. So the next one that we have is from Vieira. And Jarma, this is actually for you. Can you please say more about using TikTok in a specific assignment that you found meaningful? Vieira is currently working with students, intercultural communication students.
Yeah, so the TikTok video was actually used in class, and we were going over a lesson about different like ways that teachers and like underserved like students and parents can be involved in like the development of like course materials and stuff. We were discussing like counter narratives and education and how to kind of like loop those in. And so the TikTok video was from an educator about like, their own experience like dealing with like diverse groups. And I think like that's the interesting thing about TikTok. Like I know like a lot of people have different opinions on it, but like any social media platform, it hosts like a bunch of people who have like different types of like knowledge. And if you kind of like go and like find the credible sources, it's a really good way to do that. So in the class, we ended up like showing that video, and I think that it just made it more engaging because like there were like certain like the video effects and stuff that they use that just like made it more interesting. I think it would like students were more encouraged to ask questions based off like watching that video than if they were told to like watch like a TED Talk or some other like like super long video like explaining the exact same thing. And I think that a lot of the time too, I really appreciate when professors like understand that like we also have like other classes and other like difficult like course loads. So whenever they try to like make information as like compact as possible, but in a way where like we can easily digest it without having to like spend like too much time on something, especially if it's like a topic that can be like easily discussed in class. Like trying to make it packaged in that way is like super helpful. Another way actually I just remembered like last year I was in an education finance class, so just kind of like going over the different methods of financing education and like the different studies that like go over that. So I know for one of my professors, he's a bit younger as well, but one of the readings that he assigned for us was actually like a really long Twitter thread. And this Twitter thread was by an economist. So he kind of like had us like read through it and like, search up like specific comment, search up specific like words and like, you know, like take notes on it, like what specific things here in this example were related to what we discussed in class. And I just remember thinking that that was like so like interesting because like you're taking something that like a lot of students are familiar with and would more likely to be like engaged in, and having them, you know, it's like basically allowing students to have a say in their own learning as well, instead of just kind of like, you know, like research articles and everything. Those are very like super important, and we definitely still need those in education. But also like involving like different methods as well to kind of like have as a break from that was also like something that was super interesting. So yeah, I hope that like during the semester a lot of my other professors like include that as well, and that's something that can definitely be used because I think social media is like super controversial, but if there are positive ways that we can use it, since it's never going away, I think it could be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do just have one last question in closing. If you could have everyone here today leave with one call to action for how they might improve the educational experience to make it more equitable and inclusive, what would it be?
For me, I would say to start becoming familiar with the resources available to you, whether it's on social media, on campus. I think first it's kind of definitely information overload. I feel like my school, like I follow right now, like about 50 Instagram pages alone, just from different like offices, different clubs, Georgia State itself, because like there's always so much going on. Then at the same time, I can feel like FOMO. Then it's just like I feel so overwhelmed. So I'm like, okay, I just can't. So then at first I'm like, okay, like what's like an actionable thing? Currently, I'm president of Alpha, so it's a Latino business club here on campus. And one thing I do with my board every week is I meet up with them, and I'm like, okay, like let's go through these Instagram pages, let's go through our emails, and like let's see what are the current career fairs going on, like what are the activities going on. Okay, then like where can we get headshot? Where if someone doesn't have access to get a suit, where can we put that? Let's put that on a one pager for our members. And then so we build these tools and we become knowledgeable of these resources so like we can share it to other people. Because I firmly believe the statement that like, knowledge is power. So like once you empower yourself, once you start getting familiar with what's out there, and then sharing it as much as you can. And I know that's not always the case in terms of getting access to resources, but as there's external resources in your city or just that you can find digitally, I would encourage you to always share that with anyone else that you can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eddie. You know, for me, it's mentorship. If I could have one call to action, it would be mentorship. Get in there and get invested in the lives of your students. There are going to be some very, very above and beyond special ones that are going to match you and that you're going to see perhaps even a bit of yourself in. But get in there and be a mentor because you're going to change someone's life.
All right, I think we are at time. I just want all of you to flood the chat with your appreciation right now, all of your kudos and thanks to these amazing students who have taken time out of their schedules to join us today, to Chidinma, to Eddie, to Emma, and to Sam, who was our incredible moderator fighting nutso challenges with the weather and all sorts of things. You all brought it home for us and created an incredibly impactful moment in time that we will be sure to watch back and to keep on reflecting on for quite some time. Everybody in our community is made better because of each and every one of you. So thank you so much for your time. And with just 1 minute left, I'm going to turn the mic back over to my colleague and friend Mary Mack to close us out with some final announcements.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you to all our panelists, as Angela said, for sharing all your expertise with us today. And thanks for the great engagement questions in the chat. Just a reminder to fill out the evaluation link. It definitely helps OLC as we plan additional conferences. As a reminder, we ask that you don't edit the auto-populated session ID or conference ID fields. We need this information in the form in order to watch the feedback or match the feedback to your correct presentation. I have posted that evaluation link in the chat for you. We'd also like to invite you to join us on our first blended learning symposium. That's this June at the Gaylord Texan. And I've posted a link in the chat on that too for more information. If you register now, you can use the code below for $75 off. And we hope to see you all at Innovate 2024, which is in April 10th through the 13th, 2024 at the Gaylord Rockies in beautiful Denver, Colorado. At this time, we do end our presentation. Thanks to you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks all. Take good care.
Have a great day and stay safe.
Thanks, students. Y'all rock.
Bye.
You're so amazing.
I don't see the evaluation.
We'll drop the link in the chat again, Sinitra. Thank you for
Thank
calling
you.
that out.
Thank
Yep.
you.
I will put it in there right there again.
Mary, there were so many kudos that it flooded the chat super
Oh,
fast.
sure. That's probably, I just pasted it again, so it's there now.
Yep. All right. Take care.
All right.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.